road curved into the wilderness like a scar etched through the dying forest. Eli Turner gripped the wheel of his rusting sedan, headlights cutting narrow beams into the growing dark. The trees pressed in tighter with each mile, their branches gnarled and claw-like, reaching down like fingers ready to tear open the sky. His phone had long lost signal, and the GPS blinked uncertainly before fading to black. He was chasing a rumor, a family mystery buried beneath decades of silence. His uncle, Daniel Turner, who disappeared without a trace in 1978. All signs pointed to Greystone Inn, a place no one in town dared to mention. The air thickened as he drove farther from civilization, and even the birds had stopped singing. The once gravel road was now more mud than rock, chewing at his tires like hungry mouths. An eerie stillness settled across the woods. No animals, no wind. Just the hum of the engine and his own breath. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for him. He caught himself glancing into the rear-view mirror too often, half expecting to see something, or someone, sitting in the back seat, unseen and smiling. At last, his headlights caught something through the murk. A weathered sign stood crooked on the side of the road. Greystone, indeed. 1901. The letters were cracked, barely clinging to the wood. Moss crawled over its surface like rot. He parked, the engine sputtering reluctantly to silence. In front of him, shadowed by towering trees, the silhouette of the building loomed. More crypt than hotel, the roof sagged, vines curled over windows like veins, and the entrance yawned open. Waiting, he stared at it for a long moment before stepping out. The cold hit him immediately, unnatural, sharp, as though it had a purpose. He zipped up his jacket and grabbed the flashlight from the glove box. The moment he clicked it on, the battery indicator blinked red. Of course. Still, the beam cut a small circle of clarity through the thick night. He moved toward the inn, boots sinking slightly into damp earth, the decaying leaves whispering beneath each step. Something shifted high above in the trees, but when he aimed the flashlight, there was nothing, just branches, and shadows pretending to be more. The entrance to the inn was a pair of heavy oak doors, one hanging slightly ajar. A gust of icy air slipped out like breath from a sleeping giant. He paused at the threshold, staring into the darkness beyond. The scent of mold and old paper hit him instantly, tinged with something coppery and sharp, like rust or blood. He pushed the door open wider, hinges screaming in protest. The flashlight flickered. He stepped inside. The temperature dropped several degrees, cold seeping into his bones. The door groaned closed behind him. He didn't touch it. Inside, the lobby was a graveyard of broken furniture. Chairs sat in unnatural positions, tables overturned, and a chandelier hung by one last thread of chain, swaying ever so slightly. Cobwebs clung to the corners like hanging shrouds. Time had peeled away the wallpaper, revealing long claw-like cracks in the wood underneath. His flashlight caught a dusty guest ledger on the counter, pages brittle and yellowed. He reached for it, but a soft sound made him freeze. Footsteps. Soft. Deliberate. Coming from the hallway to his left. He swung the flashlight toward the noise, heart hammering in his chest. Nothing, just more darkness. He opened the guest book with trembling fingers. The last signature was dated July 3rd, 1978. The name, Daniel Turner. Eli's throat went dry. He ran his hand over the signature, barely believing it. It was real. His uncle had been here. And then, nothing. No checkout, no note, just disappearance. He swallowed hard and turned slowly, eyes scanning the lobby again. That hallway seemed to beckon, the air colder in its direction. Something was waiting, something that remembered. He walked forward, each step groaning under his weight. The hallway was narrow and long, and the walls were lined with dust-covered portraits, faces faded, but eyes oddly sharp, watching. He avoided looking too long at any one of them. The flashlight dimmed for a moment, then returned. Far down the corridor, he saw rooms on both sides, doors half open, but one door stood out. It was closed tight, far at the end of the hall. It was the only one without a room number, and somehow it felt like it was watching him. He didn't remember reading about this hallway in any of the old inn blueprints. In fact, none of the building's diagrams included a west wing at all. He should have hit a wall, not found this corridor. As he moved closer, he noticed something even stranger. The air didn't move, no breeze, no change in temperature. It felt suspended, like he had stepped outside of time. Even the sound of his footsteps seemed muffled. He whispered his uncle's name, and the word felt swallowed by the walls before it could fully form. Something in this place remembered. Halfway down the hallway, he noticed something odd. The wallpaper was newer, less damaged than the rest of the inn, and the floorboards, though old, bore no dust. Someone had been here recently. Or something. His skin prickled with unease. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but his feet refused to obey. He passed open rooms filled with strange things. Old toys, broken mirrors, a rocking chair moving ever so slightly with no breeze. As he stepped past one of the rooms, he swore he heard breathing, not his. Deeper, slower, close. The door at the end of the hall seemed to grow larger the closer he got. Its wood was darker, almost black, and cold steam gently rose from beneath it, disappearing into the air. No handle, just a brass keyhole that seemed to glimmer unnaturally. Eli reached out and touched the door. It was ice cold. Suddenly, the air shifted. The pressure dropped, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. His flashlight flickered again. A whisper brushed past his ear, a woman's voice. "He's still here." He spun, but the hallway behind him was empty. Heart pounding, Eli took a step back. The whisper had sounded inches from his ear. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. Then, a faint knock. From the inside. 3 slow knocks. He stumbled away, but the hallway was suddenly different, longer, darker, as if the walls had stretched behind him. He looked back. The door was still there, looming, unchanged. But now it had a number carved into it. A fresh carving, deep and wet, as if made seconds ago. It read 13, the last room, and it was waiting. Eli stared at the number freshly carved into the door. 13. Its jagged edges glistening as if the wood still bled. Something about it felt deliberate, almost intimate, like the room had been expecting him. His fingers hovered just above the cold surface. The silence behind the door was unnatural, heavy, dense. He held his breath and gently pushed. It opened without a creak, revealing a darkness far deeper than anything his flashlight could penetrate. The light trembled in his hand. As he stepped across the threshold, a bone-deep chill wrapped around him. It wasn't just cold. It was the absence of warmth, the vacuum of life itself. And it welcomed him. The door closed softly behind him without his touch, sealing with a thud that echoed like a distant drumbeat. The room's air was stagnant, yet there was no dust, no decay. Unlike the rest of the inn, this space was untouched by time. The wallpaper was intact, faded floral patterns with vines that twisted unnaturally, almost serpentine. A single candle flickered on a small table beside an antique chair. The flame didn't move, as though it existed in its own reality. On the walls, framed photographs lined every inch. Dozens, maybe hundreds, each perfectly hung and meticulously spaced. They seemed too clean. He stepped further in, drawn to the images despite every instinct screaming to look away. The photos were old, black and white, and each one featured a solitary person standing stiffly in the center of the room. Their poses were unnatural, like dolls posed for display, but the eyes, Eli felt his stomach tighten. In every photo, the eyes were hollow, not dark, not blank, but missing. Empty voids stared out from faces frozen in silent terror. He scanned the wall, searching for answers, or perhaps denial, but each photograph whispered the same truth. They were real, and they had all stood where he now stood. Now what? Where did he Then, his blood froze. His eyes landed on a photo near the center of the far wall. The frame was newer, the image clearer. In it stood a man wearing his exact clothes, flashlight in hand, expression frozen in shock. It was him. His knees nearly buckled as the reality crashed down. He hadn't taken this picture. It shouldn't exist. He stepped back, breath shallow, heart slamming against his ribs like it was trying to break free. The image stared back. His mouth was open in the photo, just as it was now. It was capturing this moment, or predicting it. Eli rushed to the door and yanked at the handle, but there was none. Just a smooth, flat surface where the knob had been. Panic rose like bile in his throat. He banged his fist against the door, shouting, but his voice was muted, like the room swallowed sound. He turned back to the candle, hoping, absurdly, that blowing it out might free him. As he approached, he noticed something carved into the wooden table beneath the flame. Time is the key. The wax dripped upward, defying gravity. The flame pulsed like a heartbeat. The air shimmered, as if the room itself breathed. A low hum began to rise, deep and resonant, vibrating through the floorboards. Eli covered his ears, but it wasn't a sound. It was inside his head. The photos began to tremble on the walls. Their frames rattled. The faces within them distorted, mouths stretching open in silent screams. The eyes, once hollow, now oozed a black substance that dripped down the frames and pooled on the floor. He backed away, eyes wide with terror. The air was thick with rot and static, each breath a struggle. The candle grew taller, flame shifting to a deep crimson, casting long, unnatural shadows across the walls. He stumbled toward the center of the room, desperate to find anything, any exit, clue, reason. And then he saw her. In the mirror above the fireplace, which hadn't been there moments ago, stood a woman, pale, dressed in mourning black, with a veil draped over her face. Her hands were clasped, yet her posture seemed unnatural, too still, too perfect. When she moved, the mirror didn't reflect Ellie, only her. She tilted her head, slowly, deliberately. A smile curled beneath the veil, too wide to be human. He turned in place, heart thunderous, but the room behind him was empty. Still, the mirror showed her closer. He took an involuntary step back. The woman behind the veil raised one finger and pointed toward the photo of Eli on the wall. His photo. It had changed. His mouth, once open in fear, was now shut tight, and his eyes gone, hollow like the rest. He let out a strangled cry and turned to face the photo directly, but it had vanished. In its place was an empty frame, glass unbroken, waiting. He looked at the table again. The candle now stood untouched, a full stick, its flame perfectly still. The carvings beneath had changed. Now they read, "You were always meant to stay." The room creaked, floorboards moaning as if settling deeper into the earth. Something scraped beneath his feet, a slow, methodical dragging. He dared not look down. The mirror cracked, a thin fissure crawling like a spider across the surface, splitting the woman's face. Yet her smile remained. The air grew thick with whispers, dozens of them, hundreds, all around him, inside him. "We see you. You belong. Take your place." They chanted in harmony, maddeningly calm. Eli pressed his hands to his ears and screamed, but there was no sound. His body trembled. The candlelight grew brighter, swallowing the edges of the room in blinding white. And then, everything stopped. The room went silent again. The flame extinguished without smoke. The whispering ceased. The air felt dead. The photos on the wall were still. Eli slowly lowered his hands. The door had returned. The handle gleamed. He reached for it with trembling fingers. As soon as he touched it, the cold shot up his arm like a surge of electricity. He opened the door, desperate to leave. The hallway greeted him, longer than before, dimmer. The room behind him vanished the moment he stepped out, replaced by a blank wall. But something was wrong. The corridor stretched in both directions, and every door was now marked 13. He began to walk, but the hallway never ended. Each step felt like a loop, each breath recycled. His flashlight flickered wildly now, catching brief glimpses of movement just beyond the light. A shadow darted behind him, too fast to see. He spun. Nothing. Then again. Something whispered from the left, then the right. The walls pulsed like living flesh. The wallpaper began to peel itself, revealing writing etched beneath in deep scratches. "Room 13 is wherever you are." He turned, horrified, as the hallway bent impossibly into a circle. He was back at the door, and the same room awaited. It opened before he touched it. Inside, everything was as it had been. The candle, the table, the photos. Only now, there were more frames on the wall. 3 more. 4. 5. All empty, all waiting. And one had begun to form. The image of his hand reaching for the door, frozen in grainy monochrome. The first time, 4 cycles. He'd fought me. And one had begun to form. The image of his hand reaching for the door, frozen in grainy monochrome. He realized, slowly, this wasn't a place he had entered. It was a place that had always known he was coming. The room wasn't haunted. It was alive. It collected. And Eli Turner had just become its next exhibit, one frame closer to a full wall of forgotten souls. The moment Eli re-entered room 13, the door sealed behind him like a vault, a soft but final click echoing into the void. The candle was lit again, though he hadn't touched it. It had been lit by someone before. The vault, soft but final click echoing into the void. The vault, soft but final click echoing into the void. The vault, soft but final click, echoing into the void. The vault, soft but final click, echoing into the void. The vault, soft but final click, echoing into the void. The same pale flame, flickering soundlessly, cast long shadows that stretched and twisted across the walls like they had minds of their own. But something had changed. The air no longer felt still. It pulsed, as though the room were breathing, or worse, waiting. Eli stood frozen in the center, his flashlight long dead, replaced by the candle's sickly glow. The floor beneath him throbbed faintly, almost like a heartbeat below the wood. He turned toward the wall of photographs and found the frames vibrating ever so slightly, trembling, as if about to rattle off their nails. And then, the whispering began. It started softly, a faint murmur like wind slipping through cracks, but grew steadily louder, surrounding him in disembodied voices. They overlapped in a maddening chorus of half-heard sentences, fragments of pain, pleas, and warnings. She watches you. Time is a circle. You were never born here. Don't trust your eyes. The voices weaved around him like smoke. Every time he turned to face one, it slipped just beyond his reach. Eli stumbled back from the wall, knocking over a small chair he didn't remember seeing before. As it hit the floor, the room shifted, literally. The walls stretched outward, growing taller, wider, then snapped back like elastic. The air rippled. Photographs began to change, faces melting and reforming, some screaming, some laughing, some crying black tears. His own photo appeared again, now with hands reaching from behind him, blurry and clawed. He blinked, and it was gone. The whispering surged louder. He pressed his hands against his ears, but it was useless. The sounds weren't entering through them. They were inside his mind. The candle's flame elongated, reaching upward like a tongue, and then split in two, casting twin shadows behind him. He turned and saw nothing. But the shadows remained. They moved even when he didn't, breathing, twitching. Following, panic welled in his chest like acid. He needed to leave. He lunged for the door, which had returned again, but the moment he opened it, he was staring into the same hallway, no different. He bolted out, refusing to let fear paralyze him. His boots pounded the wooden floor. He sprinted. Doors rushed past him, each one now marked 13, identical. The end never came. He ran faster, harder, desperate for something to change. A window, a stairwell, anything. But the hallway looped, stretching impossibly far, yet always returning him to the same spot. After a dozen sprints, he stopped. Chest heaving, sweat soaking his back, breath forming clouds in the freezing air. He turned slowly. The room door behind him creaked open again, as if inviting him back. He screamed into the hallway, a broken sound of rage and helplessness. The whispering returned, louder than ever, this time laughing, mocking. The shadows danced in the periphery, never solid, never still. He pounded his fists against the wall, screamed until his throat burned, but the wood felt like stone, cold and unyielding. From behind him, a new sound emerged. A dragging, scraping noise, slow and steady. Eli turned. The hallway darkened, the candle's light somehow following him even outside the room. Something was coming. From the far end, a figure emerged, barefoot, slow-moving, face obscured by a black veil. The same woman. She walked without sound, but the shadows clawed at the walls behind her, twitching with hunger. He backed away, but the hallway twisted with him, refusing to let him escape her path. She raised a pale hand, fingers long and jointless, and pointed at him. The whispering went silent. Time seemed to halt, and then, with one blink, the hallway disappeared. Eli found himself back inside room 13, though he hadn't stepped inside. He was in the center again, surrounded by frames that now displayed every moment he had just lived. His panic, his run, the veiled woman approaching. One photo showed her hand nearly touching his shoulder. Another showed his expression, twisted in horror. His third showed him, asleep, peacefully lying in the chair by the candle, eyes closed. But he wasn't asleep. The moment he looked at the last photo, he felt the chair behind him. It hadn't been there seconds ago, but now it creaked, as if welcoming his weight. He turned slowly to face it. Something about it drew him in. Not physically, but on some deeper level. It looked comfortable, warm even, For a terrifying moment, he wanted to sit to rest. The candle flickered in agreement. The shadows around him receded. The whispering hushed. It promised peace. Just one moment. Just one breath. But Eli knew. He knew what that chair was. A coffin with cushions. A seduction wrapped in stillness. He backed away from the chair and pressed himself against the nearest wall. But the wall gave way. Melted like tar around his back, swallowing his arm. He screamed and yanked it out, but the skin was marked with black handprints, small, childlike, burned into his flesh. He collapsed to the floor, crawling away, breathless and shaking. The candle's flame roared upward, twisting into the shape of a woman's face, mouth wide, teeth far too many, eyes hollow. The loop wasn't just spatial, it was temporal. Room 13 didn't exist in one moment, it existed in all moments, and now it was folding time around him. He tried to count the seconds aloud, anchor himself in some perception of reality. 1, 2, 3. But his voice stuttered. 1, 1, 1. Time refused to move. His watch spun rapidly, then stopped. The candle reset again, tall and untouched. The photo wall had new additions now, his mouth opening in mid-scream, eyes turning black, body frozen mid-run. He was being documented frame by frame, second by second. The room was recording his collapse. Every emotion catalogued, every failure filed. The whispering resumed, now laid with his own voice, over and over. You were always here. You were always here. You were always here. Eli stood shakily. If this was a loop, there had to be a crack, a weakness, something. He focused on the only real object, the candle. He ran to it, grabbed it, and hurled it at the wall. As it hit, the room exploded in sudden darkness. Not just the absence of light, but a suffocating void. He could feel the shadows press against his eyes, ears, even his tongue. Then, a spark. The candle was back, lit again, exactly as before. The chair was back. The photos were back. The whispers continued. Room 13 wasn't trying to kill him. It was trying to keep him. Forever looping, forever feeding. He fell to his knees. Time was gone. Logic was gone. He tried not to cry. The shadows crept in again, the veiled woman's reflection growing clearer in the mirror. She was beside him now, unmoving, patient, watching. The photo frame bearing his screaming face was nearly complete, and in that moment, Eli Turner finally understood. He hadn't entered the room had entered him. The loop would never break. There was no escape, no exit, no salvation. Just the whispering, just the watching, just the waiting, and the endless echo of his own footsteps, returning to the last room on the left. Eli awoke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the dead, suffocating quiet that presses down like a burial shroud. He wasn't in the room anymore. At least, not the one he knew. This place was darker, colder. The walls were made of blackened stone, slick with condensation. No candle burned here. No hallway waited. Just a vast chamber, empty but alive. The shadows clung to him like oil, thick and wet. His breath steamed in the frigid air, yet no warmth touched his skin. It felt like being inside a forgotten crypt, one not meant for bodies, but for souls that never passed on. He stumbled forward, boots echoing too loudly against the wet stone. The sound reverberated endlessly, bouncing back from unseen walls. His own footsteps felt foreign, like someone else's shoes. There was no door, no window, no end to the gloom. The ceiling above him was lost in darkness. but he could feel it watching, pressing down. In the far corner, a soft red glow pulsed like a dying heart. Drawn by instinct, Eli walked toward it, each step pulling at his sanity. The closer he got, the more the air thickened, turning heavy, iron-rich, like breathing in blood. The glow came from a pool, not of water, but something darker, thicker. It moved sluggishly, pulsing in rhythm with a soundless beat. Faces floated just beneath the surface, blanched, expressionless, eyes wide with terror. One of them looked like his uncle. Eli dropped to his knees, reaching toward it, but the surface rejected his touch. His fingers passed through shadow instead of liquid. The face blinked. His uncle's mouth opened underwater, releasing a stream of bubbles that never reached the surface. Behind Eli, the whispering returned, slower this time, deeper, like a voice echoing from the bottom of a well. It said his name. Eli, drawn out, hungry, familiar. He turned quickly, but nothing was there, only the same infinite black. Then, the floor beneath him shifted, not breaking, but breathing. He stood on something that pulsed beneath the stone, like muscle twitching beneath skin. The pool behind him bubbled, and from its surface rose a figure. Faceless, humanoid, and impossibly tall. It wore a long black robe that hissed as it moved, its hands long and boneless, dragging across the stone with wet slaps. It raised one finger and pointed directly at Eli. No eyes, no mouth, but he felt its voice enter his mind. You crossed. Eli backed away, stumbling over uneven stone. Crossed, he muttered, barely able to speak. The figure nodded once, and suddenly the chamber pulsed with a deep rumble, like 1,000 voices moaning in unison. The pool behind it roared, tossing violently. From it, the faces screamed, silent but agonized. The entity pointed again, but not at Eli this time. Behind him, he turned. A wall had formed where there had been only shadow. It was covered in photographs, just like room 13. Only now, they were animated. Trapped souls moved inside their frames, pounding fists, mouths open, eyes pleading, and one of them was Eli's. His photo stared at him, hands against invisible glass, mouth open in a scream he hadn't yet made. The frame flickered like a broken television, showing scenes from the hallway, the mirror, the woman in black. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around him like a chorus. You're not the first. You won't be the last. A sharp pain erupted in his skull. Memories flooding in that didn't belong to him. Names, dates, screams. Lives taken by the room. Each soul trapped here relived their moment of terror forever. Recorded and preserved. Eli fell to his knees, clutching his head, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. Then, the figure stepped forward. The shadows peeled back with each movement, revealing an altar at the chamber's center, built of bones, old wood, and broken picture frames. Upon it sat a single object, an ancient camera, rusted and silent. The figure gestured toward it, offering it to Eli like a gift or a curse. His hands shook as he approached. A compulsion seized him, his fingers closing around the cold metal without consent. The moment he touched it, images flashed through his mind. Every soul ever photographed, every death, every scream. The camera had never captured memories. It had stolen them. Suddenly he saw through the eyes of others. His uncle's final moments. A woman clawing at the walls of room 13. A child curled in the closet, whispering prayers. He gasped, choking on their pain. He was becoming them. The camera vibrated violently in his grip, but he couldn't let go. A chain had silently wrapped around his wrist, locking it to the device. The whispers became a roar. The altar collapsed beneath him, and the camera pulled him downward, into the stone, into the black, into the pool where the faces screamed. But before he sank completely, the figure spoke once more. "Now you see." Eli dropped into the darkness, through layers of memory and nightmare. Each level showed another truth, deeper and darker. He saw the inn being built on cursed land, saw rituals performed in the basement, saw the first soul stolen by the room. The camera had been used for decades, capturing fear to feed something older than time. And now Eli, through that same cursed lens, became part of it. Not dead, not alive, preserved. The chamber faded. All light vanished. Then, abruptly, he was standing back in room 13, breathless and cold, the candle lit once more. But something was different. He stood in front of the mirror, but the reflection wasn't his. It was the veiled woman's. Her hands moved as he moved, her head tilted when his did. Then, slowly, the veil lifted. Underneath was Eli's face. Blank, hand, soulless, pale, 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 pale. He screamed, but no sound escaped. Behind him, the photo wall glowed. A new frame had appeared. His face, not screaming, but serene, eyes empty. The image shimmered, and for a moment it looked like he blinked. The door creaked open behind him, but he didn't turn. He couldn't. Something else was in control now. He had crossed to the other side, and the room had claimed him. The camera sat neatly on the table, pristine again, waiting. Room 13 was ready. The cycle would begin again, and Eli, now part of the other side, would be there, watching, whispering, waiting for the next soul to cross the threshold. The door to room 13 creaked open once more, not by force, but by invitation. A soft, unnatural wind pushed it wide, as if to welcome its next guest. But no one stood at the threshold. Instead, the room stirred with awareness. Eli sat motionless in the chair by the candle, his eyes glazed, face blank. Alive in body, hollow in soul. Time moved differently now. He no longer breathed, but simply existed, part of the room's pulse. The candle flickered despite the still air, and the shadows began to stretch, peeling from the corners as if responding to some unseen signal. The room was preparing again. The walls started to tremble with a low rhythmic hum, almost imperceptible at first, then stronger, vibrating through the bones of the building. The photographs shivered on their hooks, frames ticking like clocks. Something had shifted in the inn's core. The time had come. From beneath the floorboards came a muffled clicking, like gears grinding, ancient mechanisms turning deep below. The candle's flame twisted upward unnaturally, its glow growing darker, blood red at the tip. Something was happening. The center of the city. Something had just happened. And muck. Eli's head turned slowly toward the mirror, his movements mechanical, marionette-like. In the reflection, the veiled woman was gone. Only Eli remained, but his smile didn't belong to him. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow, unsure, hesitant, another visitor. The room pulsed with anticipation, whispering to itself in unintelligible tones. The hallway grew longer, darker. Each door marked 13, identical in design, but only one truly alive. As the footsteps drew nearer, the candle dimmed slightly, its light now drawn to the door like a moth to flame. A camera appeared on the table beside Eli, its lens old but polished, clean and waiting. It hadn't been there before. It always appeared when the time was right. As the footsteps paused just outside the room, the shadows froze. Everything held its breath, but no one entered. The visitor hesitated, unsure. The door remained open, its threshold humming. Eli rose slowly, his movements creaking like old furniture. He picked up the camera, turned to face the door, and stood in silence. His hand hovered over the shutter. The whispering surged, wrapping around him. The walls rippled. The room could not be denied. From the hallway, a soft whisper responded, echoing the room's call. Another presence arrived, but this one felt different. Suddenly, a powerful wind blasted through the door, extinguishing the candle. The room plunged into shadow. The photographs rattled violently on the walls, several falling and shattering. The door slammed shut behind an unseen force. Eli staggered, blinking. The light returned, not from the candle, but from the camera. Its lens now glowed faintly, casting a cold, bluish aura around the room. Eli looked down at it, confused. Something had shifted in him. His breath returned, shallow but real. He looked at his hands, flexing his fingers like he hadn't felt them in years. The whispers became screams, dozens of them, wailing with rage. The walls began to crack, splinters of black running like veins across the surface. The mirror shattered, revealing not another world behind it, but darkness, endless and hungry. The camera in Eli's hands vibrated violently. He screamed, but this time it wasn't muffled. His voice rang out, clear and full of panic. The chair was gone, the altar gone, the pool of faces no longer present. It was just Eli and the camera and the room, now furious, breaking apart from within. The floor split slightly, black ooze bubbling through the cracks. The air twisted with pressure, as if the entire room were collapsing into itself. Eli's instincts returned. He ran to the door and yanked it open. But instead of the hallway, he faced a wall of eyes. Dozens, maybe hundreds, staring back at him. Eyes from the photographs. Eyes from the trapped. Each pair blinked in unison, and the whispering suddenly stopped. Complete silence. Then, from behind him, a voice. His uncle's. "Take the picture, Eli. That's the only way out." Trembling, he turned back toward the center of the room. The camera felt different now. Warm, alive. He raised it toward the largest wall of photographs and aimed. His finger hovered above the shutter. The silence throbbed. And then, he clicked. The flash exploded, not just with light, but with force. The room screamed. The walls tore open, releasing a cyclone of voices, wind, and memories. Photographs flew off the walls and spiraled into the air, burning to ash millions of miles away. From above, the flames danced upward to form a light bridge, spiraled into the air, burning to ash mid-flight. Small spirals of silver, liband, and memories. Photographs flew off the walls and spiraled into the air, burning to ash mid-flight. The floor cracked open and shadows poured out, clawing at the ceiling before dissolving into nothing. The camera fell from Eli's hands and shattered on the floor, its lens melting into the wood. He dropped to his knees as the entire room twisted in on itself, like a black hole consuming its own nightmare. But Eli remained untouched, kneeling, breathing, alive. Then, all at once, silence returned. The candle reappeared on the table, flickering gently. The room was whole again. No cracks, no shadows, no photographs. Eli stood slowly. He approached the door, hand trembling. This time, it opened to daylight. Actual daylight. A soft breeze, birdsong, and the scent of rain-soaked earth. He stepped outside. The hallway was gone. The inn had vanished. In its place stood an empty field, overgrown but peaceful. Behind him, nothing. Only air. He turned in circles, disoriented, unsure of how long he had been gone, or if time even existed in that place at all. Eli dropped to his knees in the grass, overwhelmed. The sun warmed his skin. He was free. Somehow. But the images still flickered behind his eyelids. The whispers still echoed faintly. And on the ground beside him, half buried in dirt, lay a single photo. Aged, worn, but still visible. It was of him, sitting in the chair, staring into the mirror, eyes dark, expression unreadable. He picked it up, hands shaking, and tucked it into his pocket. Far away, thunder rumbled. The wind carried a familiar hiss. The room was gone. For now. But the final click had only paused its hunger. It would return. It always did.